What's going on? It's Live Well Check. Today, we're going to talk about tubes, or as we call in this house, squids. Baby squids, mama squids, but squids. Tubes, they're very versatile. And I have two Bassmaster magazines here, Bream and the Beasts, Craw Power. And when you think about it, both of these magazines, I'm sure there's an article in there about bluegill or bream, sunfish, warmouth, whatever you want to call, and crawdads. Also, I don't have one at my disposal, but you're talking about shad. A tube bait can mimic all of those. A tube is extremely versatile. It works when fish are lethargic, have lockjaw, quote unquote, are in a negative mood, or when they're in a positive mood. They can be fished in all sorts of depths, and they can be fished in all sorts of ways. One of the things that I've noticed over the years about tubes is tube baits for guys that throw them, no matter what they throw them for. Could be smallmouth, could be spotted bass, could be largemouth. When I was growing up and I was around guys that fished in red man tournaments all the way up until I started fishing as a co-angler in BFLs, guys really had specific colors that they loved to throw. A lot of baits have colors. And I know that sounds silly, but a lot of baits have specific colors. And guys swear by one or swear by the other. We all know that every color out there works in some sort of situation or another. Crankbaits, could be jerk baits, topwaters, even frogs. But one bait that I've noticed there's more of a discrepancy between any of the people that I've ever fished with of a wider range of colors is tubes. Like I said, guys I grew up around that fished the red man. They fished the local tournament scene. Guys that fished BFLs when I was a co-angler. GLLS, which is the Great Lakes Largemouth Series. You're starting to talk about local clubs. You're talking about even the pros on tour. Everybody has some sort of idea of what they think is a basic color or a color scheme that they like. And then there's just a huge array of colors along with that. So today we're going to talk about a lot of colors, and I'm going to show some different ones. I have a lot of unique ones. I picked some out specifically, but tubes are just one of the baits that I have a lot of different colors for. And I think there's a reason that guys are so adamant about the colors because tubes can mimic so much different forage in the water. And you can fish them in the clearest of clear water when fish are very negative mood, and they'll nose right down to it. And when they do that, they're getting a really good look at the bait. So yes, it is something they will eat when they're in a negative mood, but if they're eating crawdads that look like this, and your tube is green pumpkin, sometimes that makes a difference. They want something a little more orange or a little more red. So when they nose down to it and they're in a negative mood and they get that look on it, they might not eat it. And I think personally, that's why a lot of guys are so adamant about certain colors. Yes, when you have muddy water. Yes, when the fish are super active. Um, Maybe a low light condition. There's going to be rules of thumb of colors that we want to use, and they're going to work very well. But in general, when you start talking about very clear water, bluebird skies, glass, right? No wind, then it's not only a technique, but I think the color comes into play a lot. And when guys throw tubes, I think that's why it's such one of those disputed conversations of what's one of the sneaky colors or what's one of the best colors. So I'm going to go through some of the stuff that's in my box. This is just if I think I'm going to throw a tube, I'm going up to St. Clair, Lake Erie, Detroit River, because I live in northern Ohio, or if I'm going to go to a local lake where we flip tubes, these are going to be just some general colors that I have to try to not only match this hatch, match this hatch, bluegill. Also, shad, don't forget about that one. So, I have a box here. And I have quite a few different colors in here. So first off, I'm going to go from the top and work down. What I do is I'll take my color scheme, so my darker colors I have in this 370, and I'll just kind of throw some in there, right? Now, usually if I think I'm going to go through a bunch, if I'm going to a tournament, I'm practice fishing, and I possibly could go through a lot of tubes, I'll bring extra bags. But first off, one of the very first colors I'm going to throw, no matter the clarity of water, it made an appearance not that long ago. Black gold, right? Black gold. Now there's a lot of different versions of this color. That's another company that kind of makes those. But that's got purple in it. Can you see the purple? I don't know if the purple makes any difference. You wouldn't think so. But I've caught less fish on this with the purple than I have this with the gold. And maybe it's because I throw this more than this one, but I'm not 100% sure. The next one is the old standby. Boom. Red and black. So it'd be black neon. Black neon. Now, when I'm talking about these two baits right here, right? I'm telling you, you would not think it makes a difference. But once in a while, when you throw those baits in the water, that gold obviously reflects gold and the red, but sometimes in the water it has a different hue. It'll still show up red, but it's the color around the bait. It shows up differently in different color of water. The gold, I think, will show up a little bit better in your clear water. Even though gold is good for like overcast days and stuff like that, and they say silver shows up better. When you have really clear water, I think that's a very natural look. And then this is more known to be a flipping bait for largemouth. The red neon around docks, wood, stumps, grass patches. And I'll drag this for smallies. I do drag the flipping size tube for smallmouth a lot. What I like to do personally when I drag tubes for smallmouth is I'll use bait casting gear. 15 to 17 pound test, sometimes 14. It's always fluorocarbon. And I personally like that a lot because there are times when it's windy or you're fishing deep enough that, and it could be the rod action, but I feel like I can handle a tube on a 3/8 ounce, even a 1/4 ounce, because this plastic, there's quite a bit of plastic here, even on a 1/4 ounce, it'll cast like a 1/2 ounce or a 3/8 ounce. And when you have that bait out there like that, I feel like, oh, there's a visitor. That's one of our dudes. He's basically a raccoon. But I feel like when I can throw that out there and I get it way out there, that with a medium heavy action rod and that 15 to 17 pound test, when I get a bite, I can wrench down on them and lean on them real hardcore. Now, I still feel like when that bait is out there a ways, I'm not going to bend the hook, but I'm going to be able to lean on those smallmouth a lot more at the end of a long cast. I feel better fighting them because I'm still not trying to horse them in, but I feel better at the end of that long cast, like I said. So this would be more for flipping. and I would drag this. Also, there's a little bit different. Check this out. Check that out. Ribbed. It's still hollow, but most of this up here is solid. So this is a genuine flipping tube. Your technical flipping tubes that are made to flip in grass, wood, stuff like that, they'll be a little solid at the top of the bait there to get a better bite with your hook. Some of the other colors, this is something. It's like a sour grape, kind of. What I like about that is on the inside, you have chartreuse. So it's almost like a June bug with the chartreuse on the inside. And that's really good. Once again, that's mainly for flipping. It's not bad for smallmouth. I've never used that one for smallmouth. But a lot of times guys will take a little bit of chartreuse and they'll put it on the back of the tails here to throw for smallmouth. But this is really good for flipping because when you're popping it up, those tentacles will split open like that. They'll flare, and you'll get that little bit of chartreuse and do some strikes. So then going on to my next section of the box would be more of the green pumpkin. So you have all sorts of versions of green pumpkin. And I don't have just traditional green pumpkin in here. I have this color, which is considered, I think it's called Christmas tree. Got red, it's got blue, green, right? That's an old school green pumpkin with the red, the green, the blue. This is just green pumpkin with green and blue without the red. Even if you see red, that's just a piece of flake that fell off of another bait and is sticking to the side of that one. And those are really good for flipping for largemouth, but then this one is more specified for smallmouth. And yeah, I know the size is different. This is the first one I really showed that's not much of a flipping tube, but still that color that's more designed for your smallmouth. It's kind of a goby action. And this would be watermelon gold, I believe. It's a dark watermelon with the gold. So it's got the different types of flake in there. You can see that. And tubes are so cool. There's such an array of colors in tubes. Then also kind of moving on to a few. Here's one. This is really good for smallmouth. It'll work for largemouth too. This is roadkill. So this is more of like a brown with like purple and orange and all sorts of different colors in there. I don't know if you can see that very well. That's why I try to roll it a few times so you can take a look at it. That's a really good color. And then this one. So if we're to think about this guy right here, that one, look at that. Look at that. Right? I know he's red, but under the water, when you get that twitching, right? Orange flake, little bit of pepper, and it's a brown tube. It's there's a color back when I was younger that we used a lot called pumpkin seed. And it came in almost every plastic pumpkin seed, but they don't really make it that much anymore. This one I've had luck on quite a bit over the years. Try to get some of the random color flake off of there. But this one is goby. That's a really good smallmouth tube. Goby. You can see that. So it's more of a translucent, like yellow, amber colored plastic with the flake in there. You get the black specks. So it'd be the seed but then you have gold, some orange, stuff like that. And that's a really cool color. Once again, there's times and conditions and local forage that make you want to pick between a few colors. And I actually I don't mix them up a lot. So I go out, I know certain areas, certain lakes, certain times, I'm gonna pick, oh, I'm flipping docks and pilings and stuff like that at a local lake. Well, I'll probably grab, that, black neon. Um, it's I don't know. You're talking more thrown up in shallow water, sandy bottom, and it's a little bit of a dingy day. It's partly cloudy, stuff like that, some wind. Grab something like this because gobies do look that color. Actually, for part of the year, gobies will look that color too. But so you got to kind of mix it up because there are going to be times where you can't tell underneath the water exactly what's going on and what those fish are keying on. And I try not to get caught up in color. That's why I start with a basic array of certain colors and then you kind of mold from there. Or if you're drop shotting and you happen to catch a goby, which I've done before, and you pull it up and it's really light colored, maybe throw that because you're matching the hatch. Let's look. This is a really old school color. I can't remember what this is. It's like amber green or something. It's a little darker than this. The plastic. It's got bigger flake. Obviously, a little different size. I'm not so caught up on the size, right? It's more the color. But it's got that green flake in there. Really good color. And that would be good for both flipping and dragging around the bottom for smallmouth. So, as we work through some of these other colors in my box, I'll tell you that there's a few colors that I've kind of seen here and there, and I don't see them around a lot. This is one. Right? There's Erie Gold. It's got the purple flake. Same with the blue. Flipping tube. I like this for flipping. One of the colors, when I grew up, the guys threw on the Red Man. When they visited Erie. And I don't know that companies make this color anymore. And these have sun damage. So they're going to look a little weird. Old school color. They're supposed to be pretty much all the way clear. And these are sun damaged. Because I have this box out a lot. Because tubes are freaking, you know what I mean? Really productive. This is called Firecracker. So it's red and blue flake with silver and gold. In basically a clear or translucent plastic. And then a couple other colors I don't use a lot, but do have utility, is that, right? Tomato. And then this is like plum. Something more you'd see like worms in, but we're mimicking the same things. Crawdads. Bait fish. So that's my box. Used to have a label on it that said squids. It's worn off now from rain and everything else. I have another box. Small tubes. You'll see some repeat colors, but it's a little different with the smaller tubes. Yeah, you're looking at some crawdads and stuff. Here's a repeat color. Roadkill. These are tiny tubes, right? Roadkill. Black gold. That's a gets it. Black gold blue. Green pumpkin gold. And these are just really small. So you would use these more in finesse presentation or big smallmouth will eat these little baits. So it'd be like the equivalent of a tube for a Ned rig. Orange crawl. It's a two-tone, brown with orange flake, and then orange with black flake. Really cool color. Really cool color. Actually, using those a couple years ago, I had a few bags of those, and they were just in here. I had my kids at a kids fishing derby, and they had caught a couple of bass and actually got a trophy and some other stuff, which was cool. But they were using little tubes and uh, little like a wacky rig jig head just shoved inside there, something really light that wouldn't get hung up on the rocks. Here's another color, like a two-tone shad, watermelon red, smoke. Just really natural looking stuff. Disco shad. And then a color that I can't really find anymore. They do call this sour grape. This is awesome. Sour grape, right? So that would be a big difference in size. And then also you look at thickness when you compare them. Here's one more, the last color I have in here. Like a watermelon pearl laminate. So you got watermelon green pumpkin, and then pearl on the back. But what I was getting at is this bait category is the one that has the biggest discrepancy, I'm telling you right now, with guys that talk about colors. Now, if you talk to a guy that only flips tubes in one lake or like one situation, he might only have one or two colors. And I can't even say that I've caught a bunch of fish on a million of these colors that I will show you because I have a bunch of different ones. But sometimes when you're going through, especially like if you're fishing St. Clair for a couple of days, the Detroit River, Lake Erie, is when you're dragging a tube, whether it's a smaller or bigger tube, doesn't matter, is when you go through and you drag on a reef or you're casting to, boulder piles or anything, rock piles, sunken ship, is that when you catch a few, just switching color can all of a sudden turn those bites back on. So it's good to have some variations of those colors because, like I said, if they're down there eating crawdads and those crawdads are green, like a green pumpkin, but maybe it's really cloudy out and they can't pick up the green pumpkin very well, or it doesn't really trigger them, so you kind of need a green pumpkin gold or a copper, it's good to have a green pumpkin gold or a copper and have them both in your box or both with you. That way, if you get some bites and then you throw the next one down there and it's a different color after you catch four or five, you can catch three or four more. And it does happen a lot. Or throw that black gold down there and you might catch a couple. And sometimes that color change catches the biggest fish in the area. I don't know why that is. I'm not 100% sure why that is. But it does happen. And smallmouth seem to be extremely focused on color alone. I'm not sure again why that is, but you can talk to guys that fish jerk baits. You can talk to guys that fish the drop shot minnows, anything. And we're not talking about like live scoping here, like just dangling something in front of their nose. We're talking about like fishing around where you don't exactly know where those fish are or what they're doing or how they're reacting to your bait. And you're casting out knowing or hoping fishing for them, and you're dragging around and you feel that bump. Or sometimes they'll pick it up and spit it right back out. And I can't say that that's a color thing. Could be a scent thing, could be a size thing, who knows? But if they're fully committed and they know that looks exactly like gobies that they've been eating all day, they're going to pick that thing up and try to swallow it. So I do feel that color can be very, very crucial when it comes to fishing for smallmouth and possibly even spotted bass. We don't have any up here. It's 5 degrees outside. It's 30 inches of snow, I swear. But there's a lot to this. And like I said, I don't throw a lot of these colors, but I have them with me if I feel like they're eating perch. Old Gander Mountain Tube. Look at that. If I feel like they're eating perch, here's a color. I've never seen this color before. That's very perchy. There's a lot of perch around this area. I know they're all over the nation, but there's a lot of perch in the Great Lakes, Detroit River. You know what I mean? Is that the main forage? I don't know. At times it can be. For some of the bigger smallmouth, they can target these perch. It might be for a few weeks out of the year. Because that's something that people need to understand too, is that fish are going to eat anything that's available, but if something is more available at certain times of the year, they know these things. And that's why these big fish get big, is they'll actually focus on certain forage certain times of the year because they kind of intersect. The smallmouth are getting deeper because it's getting hotter. The perch are getting deeper because it's getting hotter. And perch in general might be a little bit deeper than smallmouth earlier, in the summer, later in the spring because of the spawn, so they don't cross. But the gobies will, so they'll eat gobies. How about the emerald shiners? Maybe that isn't a thing that they're even foraging on unless it's early spring or late fall. So, would you want this is again disco shad. If they're eating some of those emerald shiners, wouldn't this be the thing? And that could be the thing. That could be the thing. So if you're going to tell me if for 5 or 6 weeks, and we might not always know when that is, but guys that chase smallmouth a lot during the year, going up into Canada, Michigan, Lake Michigan, all that, they know what these fish are really, really focused on throughout the year. And at some point, it could be, your perch. Boom. They're focused on perch. Or, like I said, they're focused on emerald shiners. Not that this looks exactly like it, but this looks like a perch. This looks more like a shiner. You see what I'm saying? So you really need to focus on those kind of things to help yourself put fish in the boat. And it doesn't mean that you got to be way out, fishing 3 miles from shore. This can happen in rivers, creeks, even the lakes, because there's times where fish are really feeding on perch in the lakes, or shad or minnows in the lakes. I did want to show this too. I'm going to hide that for a second to show the difference in some of these baits, right? Like, there's so much to tube fishing, and people don't think that, because when you look at it, it's just a do nothing bait. But it catches so many fish. It's been catching fish since its inception, which was probably in the year, 50 AC. Chompers. I have all sorts of different companies. I'm not company specific when it comes to these lures, because a lot of these companies, like Bass Pro Shops, makes a really good, I think it's called Double Dipped 3.5. Very, very good. They stand up to a lot of the abuse. They're perfect for dragging on a jig head, open hook, out for smallmouth. You can flip them. Chompers, they make a couple of good colors I like. Other than that, I don't care that much about chompers, but they make some good colors I like. Mismo. Oh, look, some jig heads even that were in there. It's crazy. Jig heads. Pregas. I was using them. And then a different design. And then to show you guys the difference between these. Tender tubes. Gets it. Finesse tubes, right? Different size. Different profile. Little slender. Then you have a flipping tube, right? And there's even sizes in between these. And then a big boy tube. And there's even bigger than this. They make tubes of all sizes. When you look at these, they make tubes of all sizes. Like a molten craw. The blue, the orange underneath, green pumpkin. You flip that around. Very enticing. Looks very, very good. This, I'm going to tell you something. There's a river. I'm not going to give up the river name, but there's a river name. And that river, this works really well. Guys have sworn by this in that river. Yeah, gonna have to put a few of these in the box. What I will say about rigging some of these baits, there's a couple simple ways to do it. Got your tube heads, right? Just basic tube heads. You can do this any way you'd like. Typically with the wide gap, you do something a little different. I'm not going to get into all that, but you basically take a tube, right? Let's pick one out. Why not? Favorite color. Favorite color. Supposed to wet it. You'd stick it right in there because it's hollow. Right in there like that, all the way up. And then you use your fingernail and you bring that eyelet out like that. You just tie that on. It will twist your line because tubes, when they fall, they twist. That's kind of the allure, right? So you'd want to use that over open water. You know, obviously you're not going to want to throw that in a lot of grass or wood or anything. And I got a funny story about that. So I'll put that in here. And then the other one would be taking, let's see which one I want to do. A random, actually, because that's a little short tube. I don't want to do a full on, that's Erie Gold, by the way. That's your traditional Erie Gold right there. But if you just took a flipping tube chompers, that one I was telling you about the river, and you just barely go in, come back out like that, flip it around like that. Just like that. Just like that. Ready to catch fish. And you put a bullet weight on it. You could peg it if you wanted. Some guys actually put beads and stuff in between the bullet weight and the line tie. And don't forget, there's different designs of tubes too. This is kind of like a little different design. It's got like flappers, you can kind of see. So it's got the tentacles, but it's got a flapper too. Right? It's kind of hard to see. This is Power Team Lures. I think I got them on clearance. Yeah, cheap. Got them on clearance, 3.5 size. So it's just that right size. I like to keep lead heads in my tube box, but always make sure they're all the way sealed up. Otherwise, they'll get rusty and oxidized. So I'll just put those in there. That would be about the size weight you'd use for a bullet weight. About a 1/4 ounce. That's a good typical flipping size for a tube. You don't want it to be too heavy. If it's too heavy, the bait won't work the way you want it to. But you do want it to be like an 1/8 or a 1/4 when you're flipping it, so that it works right. So it gets that, what they call the death spiral, which entices a lot of bites. So I got to tell a little bit of a story. So that one tube that I brought up, there's a river that this is really good in. And we weren't even necessarily using this. I think I was throwing a jig, but I was fishing with a buddy of mine. It was in a club I used to run. I was the president, and we would fish john boats and bass boats and stuff together. And because of the way this river was at this point in time, it was really high. We had gotten a lot of spring rains. It's very, very, very productive river early in the season. We had decided that people in john boats probably shouldn't fish it. So we tried to pair up our john boat guys with a bass boat, and they would just compete directly off the back of the boat. It was just a buddy tournament. It's more about learning and out there enjoying competition with guys that are enthusiastic about bass fishing. It was called the Small Water Bass Angler Association that I founded years ago, and then we dissolved after a handful of years or so. Guys just kind of got busy, and stuff happens. 2020 really kind of complicated things, but so we were on the main river, and there were some spots in the marinas off the river that I knew, and he had some spots on the main river. I also did, and we pulled up, and there's this highway that goes over the river, and there's a culvert that the runoff from the highway would go down through like the drainage system, and it would dump into the river from the rainwater, so it wouldn't flood the road. And they're giant culverts, right? And what it would do is it would create current, and there would be eddies there because you had the bridge like this, and if the river was flowing underneath the bridge, is there was a cutout here, and there was a marina. Just so, like, if I'm looking at the culvert and we're fishing the culvert, there's a big eddy there, but there's also the mouth of the marina right there. So we can fish that area quick and then dump right into the marina where we knew some fish were. And we were fishing, and he always throws a tube. Always, always, always throws a tube on straight braid, spinning tackle. It's like 20-pound test. And he's got the exposed hook, and he's dragging this tube around. He's really, really good with a tube. Like, he can catch anything on a tube. So he throws out in this big eddy, right? And I'm throwing the jig. So what I would do is he's throwing out in front of the boat towards the culvert, and he was fishing about a half-ounce tube, so it wasn't washing around. I was doing the opposite. Is I was fishing like a 3/8 or so. I believe it was a 3/8, and I was throwing to the edge of the current, and then I was letting the jig kind of wash down. So I would like bounce it up into the current, and I'd let it wash down until it settled. And I would bounce it up, and I'd let it wash down until it settled. And we weren't even sure if there were fish there. I've never fished there specifically. It's a good spot. Looks like a very, very productive spot. To me, I felt like there was a little too much current, but we were fishing it. He had caught fish there before. So he throws out, and we're fishing. And no sooner than probably a couple of, he pops it a couple times. He, in his reel, it whines a little bit. It says, "Get the net. I got one. I got one." And it's, you know what I mean? It's running. And there's big smallmouth. This is early spring. There's big smallmouth in this river too. So there's big largemouth and big smallmouth. We're pretty sure because of where we're at, smallmouth. And it gets in the current, takes off, and he's get the net, and he's fighting it, and we ain't seen it yet. And he gets it to the side of the boat, and I got the net like this, and goes to pull it up. It's a road cone. Oh, son of a gun, right? And he's daggone it. And he's got this road cone just stuck in the side, and he's trying to pop it off. And it was one of those skinny ones that just stand up, just kind of like for directional. Oh man, I really thought I had one because when he felt the heaviness and he set the hook, what he did is he pulled it up off the bottom and it got in the current and took off, which is what a smallmouth or a largemouth will do too. When they're in the current, they're not always going to come up and try to jump. So we're cracking up, and he unhooks, and I cast out a couple times, and he casts out again, and a couple casts later, "Get the net, fish, get the net." Oh, dude. And he's like, "Big one, big one." Brings it up, and it was a dock tie off. It was a giant piece of rope. This is a giant piece of rope with like a knot, big, thick. I'm like, "Bro." And he's like, "Daggone," right? And he like had to cut the tube off, and he's trying not to throw it back in the river. So he's like, got that in the boat, and it's all muddy and stuff. And he's like, "Dude." And so we stayed there a couple more minutes. We're fishing. We're getting ready to leave, and he's like, "One more cast," and he casts up towards the bridge. So he casts on the left of the culvert, and he gets one on finally, and we're like, boom. And he was like, "Net, dude, net." And it's doing this thing. It's going, this way, back this way. So we know it's a fish. We know it's a fish. And he's, dude, it's all over the place. It was going this way with the current, come back this way with, in the slack water. Is a piece of concrete, just a slab piece of concrete with a rebar hanging off it. And I'm losing it. I'm cracking up in the back of his boat. I'm literally like laying on the ground cracking up. And I'm like, "You ready to get out of here?" And he's cussing up a storm. He can't believe it because the way all three of those not fought, but like when they got hung up and went in the current, it seemed like a fish. And he was pretty upset about it. But it was hilarious, especially on that last one, because I watched it and his line would go like this and then come back this way. And what it was is it was that flat piece of concrete is it would catch current and it would go like this and then it would flip back over. And he somehow wrapped around that rebar, down there somewhere and brought it up. But it was a very, very funny time that we were fishing that culvert. And him and I did pretty good for that tournament. We didn't catch any out there on that main river stuff. The current, I think, was just a little too much for those fish. And we went back in the marina and we fished around, caught a few, went to a little sneaky spot. There's a old housing development that's hard to get to, but because of the way the wind was pushing in this area, it had pushed a bunch of water across a giant expansive flat where you didn't have to go up and around and take the canal to get in there. You could just cut across. So he decided to just cut across, and he had done this before. And we went in there and we caught him pretty good. We caught him pretty good on jigs and spinner baits, and well, obviously his tube. So it was a really good time. But this main video, I know I didn't talk a lot about rigging. There's going to be some like detailed stuff that I'd like to do with not only Carolina rigs and different rigs like that, but tubes. There's a lot of little secret stuff that you can do with tubes, and I would like to really talk about that in another video. But this was mainly about there's a million different colors because these baits are so versatile that they can mimic nearly anything, to the point where, once again, a lot of guys don't even think about throwing a color like that. But that could be the deal. You got muddy water. People think black, right? What's this? Little piece of something. But they think black neon. But if they're eating a lot of shad and crappie, this could be the deal. You know? I know I haven't shown that color yet. So there's just, go to your tackle store, get on Tackle Warehouse or something, and look up all these different tubes. Dude, these companies have a million colors of tubes. And a lot of times people stop buying the colors of different baits. They stop making them for whatever reason. People lose favor with different colors over the years, or certain baits or styles or whatever. Tubes always have a million colors. And I truly feel it's the stuff that I talked about early in the video about how they mimic so many different bait styles. Could be bream, or it could be crawdads, and anything in between. Perch, shad. So I truly feel that that's why there's so many colors. And you should check it out another time. We're going to be doing videos like this once or twice a week. And I'll get more into the details of doing some rigging and some techniques and stuff like that. And breaking down lakes at some point. There's going to be a lot of different stuff that we do. But for sure. And if you're using an exposed hook with a tube, do not fish around trees, stumps, rebar, boots, road cones, or just random stuff that's just caught in a river somewhere, because it'll be like magnet fishing. You're not sure what you bring up, but it won't be a fish. All right, till next time.